Do you ever have that place in your mind that feels like it's real even though you've never been there? A place that's not just part of a game or a story, but something much bigger. Something you can almost feel if you close your eyes. That is what the Northern Hemisphere is to a lot of people. It's not just a setting, it's like this living, breathing place that's tucked away in people's imaginations. A wild, hectic world where the rivers never stop flowing, the trees stretch so high they disappear into the sky, and there's always a secret waiting just out of view. And sure, that probably sounds dramatic for a almost 30-year-old 16-bit platformer, but honestly, DKC 3 deserves it. It is my least favorite out of the original trilogy, but it still deserves all the praise. The game isn't just about running, jumping, blah blah blah, though don't get me wrong, there's plenty of that too. It's about the adventure and just the vibes of it, much like the second game. The sense that you're stepping into a world that's much bigger than you are, with mysteries to uncover and dangers at pretty much every turn. And so here we are, Dixie Kong, fearless and determined, and Kiddy Kong, who, let's face it, it looks like he should be in a daycare somewhere rather than on this quest. They're not exactly an obvious duo like Diddy and Dixie were, but they work for the most part. There's something endearing about the way that Dixie takes the lead, flipping through the air with her ponytail while Kiddy barrels through obstacles like an excited toddler. Together, they're exploring this massive wilderness to find Donkey and Diddy, who have gone missing again. But really, the search is just an excuse to dive headfirst into this sprawling, mysterious world. One of the best things this game does is it has an actual overworld that you can go, like it's much different than the first two games, because in the first two games you were just going from point A to point B. But this is part of the journey. You're not just selecting levels, you're steering this little motorboat through rivers, dodging rocks, and trying to figure out how to get to that one spot that's just out of reach. And the thing is, the map feels like a place. It's not linear. There are secret paths and side areas, places where you can dock your boat and find something unexpected, maybe a hidden cave or a cabin that belongs to the Brothers Bear, or even just a hint about something bigger. But it's the kind of map that makes you slow down and look at it, wondering what you might have missed. And the levels, honestly, they're really good. Each level feels like a little snapshot of this world. Like take Lake Orangutanga, for example. It's just a lake at face value, but the way that the sunlight glints off the water with the mountains in the background and the way the music makes you feel like you're out on a lazy summer afternoon, I think it's great. It's so peaceful that you almost forget that there are enemies waiting to knock you into the water. And then you've got places like Cremwood Forest. You're climbing these massive trees with the sunlight barely breaking through the leaves, and everything just feels so still. It's quiet, almost reverent, like the forest is alive and it's watching you. You can almost smell the damp moss and hear the creak of the branches underneath your feet. But just when you think you have the game figured out, it throws something like Riverside Race at you. I remember actually the first time that I played it, I didn't know that it was timed. So I'm just playing the game normally, taking my time, wandering along, and then suddenly there's a big clock ticking down on the screen and I failed. Next thing I know, I'm doing it again, dodging dragonflies, leaping over gaps at Mach 3, and just praying that I make it to the end. It's chaotic, but in a really great way, and those timed gimmicks and other gimmicks in the game don't ever overstay their welcome. The underwater levels this time around, I really enjoy them. A lot of people, for very good reason, don't love underwater levels in games, particularly in games like Mario, where, don't get me wrong, I love 2D Mario games, but the DKC games are obviously a lot more inventive when it comes to the platforming, the backgrounds, the environments, etc. And these water levels are some of the most beautiful and the most unsettling. The way that the light filters through the water, and with the music shifting to something softer, it's almost haunting, and it reminded me a lot of aquatic ambience from the first game. But there's always a tension, like you're not supposed to be there. Again, just much like in the second game, because you were invading Crocodile Isle trying to get Donkey Kong back. Maybe it's a giant fish lurking just off screen or the sudden spike traps, but it definitely keeps you on the edge in the best way possible. And then there are the bosses, my favorite bosses in the entire Donkey Kong Country franchise. They are not just obstacles, they are not just beads that you have to hit with a barrel a couple times, they're not just a beaver that you have to jump on 3 times, they're events. Chaos, this hulking robot, feels like something out of a science fiction movie with sparks flying everywhere and gears grinding. And then there's Barbos, this enormous underwater creature that you have to outmaneuver while it tries to skewer you, and doing that on SNES controls is rather challenging. Each boss feels very unique, very fresh, and like it belongs to this world, and beating them always feels like you have earned it. So obviously, the vibes in Donkey Kong Country 3 are there, and they work very well. I think this game is criminally underrated, and like I said, while it is my least favorite out of the original trilogy, I do like it more than Returns. Not as much as Tropical Freeze, but I definitely like this one more than Returns. But it's just, if I ever want to play a Donkey Kong Country game for the vibes, it's Donkey Kong Country 3 that I end up playing. And the music by Evelyn Fisher, Evelyn Novakovic at the time, she really does a great job. I haven't really given her the due that she deserves with my past couple videos. She did help out David Wise a bit in the first and second game. I think mostly in the first, but I know she did a bit in the second game, and she was the lead composer this time around, and I really think she does a great job. Again, I don't think most of it quite lives up to what David Wise had proceeded with, which that is an incredibly high bar, so I'm not going to hold it against her. She does a great job, and a lot of these tracks I find myself whistling pretty much on the daily. It's a great OST, and it deserves the praise. At the end of the day, the real magic to me of Donkey Kong Country 3 isn't the levels or the bosses or even the secrets. It's just the way that it makes you feel. It feels like you've been somewhere, like you've been on vacation that takes a turn. Like you've stepped into this wild, beautiful world that's bigger than you are, full of places to explore and mysteries to uncover. It's the kind of game that doesn't just stick in your memory, it settles into your bones. Even years later, I can close my eyes and see the rivers, the forests, the mountains, the backdrops in this game, like with the mountains and everything, climbing the cliffs. It's so well done, and I'm glad that finally, within, the Nintendo sphere, people are slowly starting to give this game the credit that it deserves, because it really is, like I said in my original DKC3 video essay, it is a perfectly adequate finale to this trilogy. It is a great game. So if you ever get the chance, if you own it originally on the SNES, or if you somehow have it on a virtual console of a past gaming system, or if you have Nintendo Switch Online on your Switch, go ahead and play it. You will not be disappointed, especially if you're a 2D platformer fan in general, or you're a fan of Nintendo, or a Donkey Kong Country fan, because this game is a great Donkey Kong Country game. So, if you ever get the chance, play it, regardless of the means. But don't rush through it. Take your time, much like in the first 2 games. Go ahead, take your time and take everything in. Wander a little bit. Let yourself get lost in the vastness of the Northern Hemisphere. Because games like this don't come around super often. This trilogy, I have said for years, is a lot deeper than people give it credit for, and I might occasionally be grasping at straws, but games like this don't come around very often, as we've seen, especially since the game came out. They're not just about finishing the story, they're about adventure and the vibes that they give off and the way that they make you feel. It's the kind of game that stays with you long after you're done with it. The levels are great, the art design is great, the music is great, Dixie Kong is awesome, Kiddy Kong is okay, I know a lot of people like him, I know obviously a lot of people despise him. This game is just very good, and I think you should try it out if you haven't. And like I said before, this game and the trilogy as a whole is a lot more than just running and jumping through levels. It's not just about the thrill of the journey, but the pull to keep exploring, even when the story is over.